Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a notoriously complex book, Julius Evola's The Mystery of the Grail. We're going to break down its core arguments and try to see this legendary object in a completely new and, frankly, pretty surprising way.
So when you hear Holy Grail, what pops into your head? Yeah, for almost everyone, it's the cup from the Last Supper, maybe the one that caught Christ's blood, a huge, sacred relic at the very center of Christianity.
But here's the first big twist. According to this source, that Christian story, it isn't the real story. It's just a later version, a kind of coating painted over a much, much older pre-Christian mystery.
So, let's dive right into this other version of the Grail, one that supposedly existed long before Christianity. Okay, the author's entire argument really hangs on three core ideas. First, the Grail legend comes from a Hyperborean tradition, which is a fancy way of saying a lost, primordial, almost mythical northern civilization. Second, the Grail isn't about religious belief for the masses. It's about a hands-on, initiatory path for a select few. And third, and this is key, it's a deeply political symbol for a very specific goal, the restoration of a sacred, holy empire.
Now, to even begin to understand this, you have to get your head around the unique way this book analyzes the past. It's all about reading history as if it were a myth.
And that's called the traditional method. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Instead of digging through a myth to find a few little nuggets of historical fact, this method does the opposite. It says that history as we know it, the dates, the events, is just a shadow. And the myth is what reveals the true shape of the thing casting that shadow, what the author calls superhistory. This quote from Julian the Apostate just nails the concept. The point isn't whether the Grail story literally happened. The source argues its truth comes from the fact that it describes an eternal pattern, something more real and more important than any single isolated event in time.
So you can see the fundamental clash right here. The scientific method we're all used to is looking for verifiable data, for receipts. The traditional method, on the other hand, is looking for universal blueprints hidden inside of stories and symbols. Two totally different ways of looking for truth.
Okay, so what happens when you apply this method to the Grail? Well, according to the book, it unlocks the legend's hidden political code, a blueprint for a very specific imperial dream. The book frames all of history as a kind of spiritual decay, a downward spiral through 4 ages. It begins with a golden age, a time when humanity had this direct, innate, Olympian connection to the divine. This then fades into a silver age of priests and rituals, which gives way to a bronze age of warriors rebelling against that authority. And that leads us to where we are now, the Iron Age, a world that is purely human, purely earthly. But, and this is a huge but, it's not all doom and gloom. The source says that even in this decline, there's a path for a hero, a chance to fight back against the current of decay and actually restore that original Golden Age state. This is the heroic cycle. And this is where it gets really fascinating, because there's a razor-thin line between the hero and the Titan. Both of them are powerful figures fighting against the way things are. But the hero's goal is to reconnect with the divine order. The Titan, on the other hand, acts out of pure pride, trying to steal that divine fire for himself. And according to this worldview, that always ends in a tragic fall. So where did this heroic energy go in the real world? The book argues it found its political home in the Ghibelline movement. The Ghibellines were these medieval figures who dreamed of one thing, a powerful, unified, holy Roman Empire. But not just a political power, a sacred power, one that was totally independent of the Pope's religious authority. And that brings us to the absolute heart of the Grail legend, the wounded king. He isn't just some sick guy. He is the empire. He's a living symbol of that sacred power that has lost its way, lost its divine connection. He's wounded, asleep, paralyzed, just waiting for a true hero to show up, ask the right question, and jolt him and the entire empire back to life.
So if this Ghibelline ideal was so important, who was keeping it alive? Well, the book argues it was passed down in secret by a few key groups.
The most direct connection the book makes is to the Knights Templar. I mean, in some of the original German Grail stories, the Grail's guardians are literally called Tempel, which means Templars.
The source argues their whole path, this blend of warrior and monk, was the real-world version of the Grail knighthood. And their violent destruction, symbolically, that was a crusade against the Grail itself.
And get this, the book flips the very charges used to destroy the Templars completely on their head. That charge of rejecting the cross, it wasn't blasphemy, it was an initiatory test to see if you could move past the surface-level symbol to a deeper truth. Those secret liaisons with Muslims, not treason, but a recognition that a true warrior spirit can exist across different faiths. And this secret stream of knowledge supposedly popped up in other places too, just in disguise. The mysterious woman that the troubadours sang about, the book interprets her as a symbol for holy wisdom, or maybe even the secret Ghibelline doctrine itself. And the quest for the philosopher's stone and alchemy, it was called the royal art, and its goal was to heal a sick king. Sound familiar? It's the wounded king myth all over again.
All right, we're coming to the end now, and this is where the book drops its most controversial and provocative claim. It argues this imperial legacy wasn't just lost or forgotten, it was counterfeited and inverted.
The author's assertion is that modern organizations, and Freemasonry in particular, basically co-opted the symbols and structures of this older tradition. All the talk of temples, knighthood, and hidden wisdom, but they turned its meaning completely upside down. And this chart really lays out the alleged flip. The Ghibelline goal was hierarchical, right? It was about restoring a sacred authority from above. The source claims the modern, inverted version uses a similar structure to promote revolution from below, to make the people sovereign, and to create a purely secular state. It's a total reversal.
And to back this up, the book cites what it says is a Masonic manual. And in this text, the Templars' revenge isn't about bringing back the sacred king. No, it's celebrated as the destruction of the crown and the church, leading to the rights of the individual and of the citizen, the ultimate triumph of the secular world.
Which leaves us with a final, really challenging question to chew on. If we accept the book's premise, that myths aren't just stories, but are active forces that can build empires, what happens to our world when the meaning of such a powerful myth gets captured and turned against its original purpose? That's the mystery.